What happens when one of the greatest promises in Formula One goes from fighting for victories to sinking into the midfield without a clear explanation? Oscar Piastri arrived in Brazil with more questions than answers, but now McLaren has broken the silence. Was the problem technical, psychological, or was there something else? The problems intensified in Mexico. There, Piastri was completely off the pace with Norris. Engineers initially thought it was a configuration error, but multiple adjustments over the weekend failed to reverse the situation. From the wall, the pilot's body language was unmistakable: frustration, disorientation, doubt. For the first time since his arrival in F1, Piastri seemed to have lost control of his destiny in the car. The contrast with Norris began to become evident, and with it, theories arose about possible internal preferences within the team. Although McLaren's entourage categorically denied it, and personalities such as Martin Brundle asked for caution with speculation, the rumors permeated part of the public. The media narrative turned towards a supposed Norris dependence of the team, and Piastri went from being the jewel of the future to becoming a worrying case of free fall with no apparent explanation. This abrupt collapse is what makes his case so intriguing and, at the same time, so disturbing. Because we're not talking about a driver who simply had a bad weekend. We are talking about a figure who seemed designed to resist the pressure of the elite, and who suddenly lost the reference of what made him competitive. The question is inevitable: how could such a methodical pilot fall so quickly without clear prior signs? The answer to that mystery takes us directly to the technical heart of the MCL39 and to an anomaly that, until a few days ago, not even McLaren's own engineers knew existed. But we will address that in the next block. For now, the truth is that Oscar Piastri arrived at the Brazilian Grand Prix at the most critical moment of his young career, and with a lot to prove. When McLaren finally decided to speak out, the Formula One community held its breath. The silence of recent weeks, the lack of clear answers, and the evasions in public statements had only fueled skepticism. But then Andrea Stella, team director, appeared to give the official version. In it, he dismantled many conspiracy theories and pointed with surgical precision to the origin of Oscar Piastri's problems. The explanation was technical, deep, and revealing. The MCL39, although an aggressive evolution of the successful 2024 car, had begun to show symptoms of a specific, but highly detrimental, imbalance. On low-grip circuits like Austin and Mexico, the car required extremely precise and aggressive driving to generate tire temperature and extract maximum performance. While Lando Norris seemed to have an almost intuitive ability to compensate for these conditions, Piastri, for his part, was in the process of completely reprogramming his driving style. It wasn't a lack of speed, but a disconnect between the car and its instinct. But the real problem was not psychological. In the days following the Mexican GP, the McLaren technical team carried out a thorough review of Piastri's car. The objective was to eliminate any structural suspicion arising from the accident in Baku the previous season, where some had begun to speculate that the Australian's chassis was not in perfect condition. The results were conclusive. There was no damage to the chassis, nor failures in the structural components or the gearbox. However, that was when an unexpected anomaly arose. Engineers detected an irregularity in the cooling system that directly affected the aerodynamic flow over the rear axle. This failure, although subtle, generated a progressive loss of balance, especially in conditions where the asphalt did not help to stabilize the car. The most visible consequence was uneven wear on the rear tires, especially on the right flank, which reduced traction on corner exits and caused abnormal degradation even during short runs. In the words of a team engineer, it was like discovering that the car was fighting against itself. The loss of stability caused Piastri to constantly have to compensate with steering corrections, less aggressive braking, and forced anticipation in corners. This not only affected his pace, but chipped away at his confidence lap after lap. This is where the technical problem intersects with the human factor. When a driver loses faith in the behavior of his car, his performance inevitably drops, no matter how much talent he has. McLaren acknowledged that this defect had been particularly invisible during the early events of the season. Wind tunnel and CFD simulations did not detect the loss of efficiency, since the defect only manifested itself in specific dynamic situations, such as high-altitude circuits or low track temperatures. Mexico, with its combination of thin air and little grip, was the perfect setting for the problem to come to light. However, the great unknown remains. Is this enough to restore the bond between pilot and machine? Because although the problem has been identified and corrected, the emotional damage has already been done. Piastri has experienced weeks of doubt, external criticism, internal pressure, and constant scrutiny. The Brazilian Grand Prix will be more than just a race for him. It will be the scenario where the car and its confidence must be reunited, or confirm that the wound has been deeper than expected. In modern Formula One, where the difference between resounding success and utter failure can be measured in tenths of a second, a driver's confidence is not just a psychological detail. It is an asset as vital as aerodynamics, engine power, or DRS efficiency. And that is precisely what Oscar Piastri has lost. The technical correction implemented by McLaren before the Brazilian GP is, in theory, the closing of the darkest chapter in the Australian's young career. But in practice, repairing a car part is not equivalent to restoring harmony between driver and machine. Because Piastri not only needs to feel that the car responds to his commands, he needs to trust his own decisions within the cockpit again. This stage of emotional and technical reconstruction is deeply complex. The driver cannot simply erase the last 3 races from his memory. Every mistake, every poorly negotiated curve, every attempt at adaptation that failed has left traces. And the most delicate thing is that, in many moments, those errors were not his, but caused by a condition that not even he understood. This prolonged misinformation can cause lasting damage. Doubts about his own talent, his role on the team, and his ability to compete head-to-head with Norris and the rest of the elite. Added to this is external pressure. The internal comparisons with Lando Norris do not stop. The Briton, in addition to being the visible face of McLaren, currently leads the championship. His pace has been relentless, his consistency admirable, and his attitude within the team radiates authority and confidence. Faced with that consolidated image, Piastri has begun to seem vulnerable, even replaceable in the most critical eyes of the paddock. And that creates an even more dangerous psychological dynamic. Because in F1, the environment also counts. Every weekend, a driver lives with dozens of engineers, strategists, analysts, mechanics, directors, and sponsors. When the narrative starts to turn against him, everything around him becomes more tense. Looks change, instructions become more rigid, and the atmosphere is no longer conducive to performance. This doesn't necessarily mean that McLaren is abandoning Piastri. In fact, they have proven the opposite by identifying and correcting their problem. But the driver needs more than just data. He needs to feel that the team believes in him as strongly as they did in 2024. This rebuild requires more than tune-up adjustments. It requires an internal redesign of his confidence, a strategic reprogramming of his piloting, and, above all, an external validation that once again positions him as a real threat to the rest. You need a result. An impeccable Sunday. A career without errors, without doubts, without justifications. And Brazil could be that scenario. Oscar Piastri's immediate future does not depend only on engineering. It depends on your ability to demonstrate in adverse conditions that you don't need perfect conditions to shine. That his was not only a good year, but the confirmation of a talent that has come to stay. Because in this sport, champions are not made on the podiums. They forge themselves when everything seems to be against them, and yet they find their way back to the top. Oscar Piastri is at the most delicate point in his short but promising career in Formula One. Everything that has built his reputation as a meticulous driver so far, his role as a key player in McLaren's technical revolution, his image as a cold but consistent figure under pressure is being put to the test with brutal intensity. The Brazilian Grand Prix is not just another date on the calendar. It is a date with your own destiny. It is the opportunity to transform a period of uncertainty into a narrative of resilience. If he manages to find the rhythm again, if he manages to translate the technical corrections into real confidence inside the car, and if he is able to withstand the pressure without breaking down, then he will have taken a gigantic step towards that elite of drivers who not only win races, but also survive the storms. Because being fast in a competitive car is something that many can achieve. But overcoming a performance slump without losing yourself in the process, without breaking down emotionally or professionally, is reserved for true champions. On the other side of the garage, Norris is shining. And there's no greater pressure on a driver than having your teammate win races while you struggle to find stability. It is the cruelest mirror because it leaves no room for excuses. They both have the same car. They both have the same equipment. Only one is getting results. Do you really believe that Oscar Piastri can be reborn from this storm? Or do you think that its history has changed forever, and that McLaren is already clear about who will be its long-term leader? I want you to leave me your opinion in the comments. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.